What's goody world? I'm back. Back with the homie Wendigoon. Hey, y'all let me know the backstory on that name, Wendigoon. When I hear goon, I'm just like, hey, wait a minute. How did we arrive here? But I don't know. It could just be his last name or his first name. Who knows? But y'all let me know if there is a backstory. So just like any other Wendigoon video, man, it's like, I guess when it comes to him, there's like a certain, I don't know, y'all. It's like everybody's telling me to react to the same video. You know, typically, like if I do a Sabaton, you know, you get 12 people telling me to do 12 different songs, asking me to react to 12 different songs. With Wendigoon, it's like, oh, you did that one now. Everybody's like, you got to do Waco. Like, there's no, hey, do this one. No, you got to do Waco. So here we are. The Cult, Standoff, and Conspiracy of Waco. It's hour 37, man. I'm about to clock in. Learn me something, Wendy, man. Let me know what happened, man. What went down in Waco? Let rock.
Hello everybody, today we're going to talk about the Branch Davidian cult of Waco, Texas, the 51-day standoff between them and federal authorities, and the conspiracy of what really happened. Regardless of opinion, the Waco siege is widely regarded as one of the largest tragedies in law enforcement history. And depending on who you ask, it was either the result of a deranged cult leader and his loyal followers, or a massacre at the hands of a tyrannical government. Despite being one of the most widely publicized and documented standoffs in American history, where the guilt is to be placed and even some of the events that might have happened are still up for debate. After poring over dozens of news reports and several hours of interviews with both federal agents and Branch Davidian survivors, I feel confident that we can put together a picture of not only what happened, but where this cult came from and how it all ended so tragically. And if that sounds interesting to you, then stick around as we get into the story of America's most infamous standoff. Hey, real quick, remember that last time I did a Magic Spoon ad and said I was probably going to try out some more of their flavors? Yep. With no exaggeration, Magic Spoon has been the only cereal I have had since I did the first ad. And it's to the degree that they sent me my own fancy bowl and a literal magic spoon. I need help. But for now, I can help you with today's sponsor, Magic Spoon. Magic Spoon is the low-carb, keto-friendly breakfast that's gluten-free, grain-free, and soy-free. On top of that, Magic Spoon has 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, only 4 grams of carbs, and 140 calories per serving. And not only is Magic Spoon the most healthy breakfast option available, but in some form of sorcery that led me to all of this, it tastes great too. Like really, it tastes fantastic. I'm not even one who normally cares about how many calories I'm eating or how healthy my food is, even though I definitely should. And now thanks to Magic Spoon, I can be a kid again and just eat breakfast cereal and not have to deal with the overbearing weight of my own mortality. So if you're interested in this because you can't have gluten or wheat, or if you're just trying to be more healthy, or if you just want to try a good cereal,
Never heard of this
Magic
cereal.
Spoon has you covered.
Never
and
heard
thanks
of
to
this
Magic
cereal.
Spoon, you can get in on this fantastic offer for $5 off by going to the link in the description at magicspoon.com/Wendigoon or entering the code Wendigoon at checkout. That's right, you can get in on this for $5 off. If you're looking at just selecting a few, I personally recommend the maple waffle, the cinnamon roll, and the fruity, as those are my favorite. Or if you want to try any of the other flavors, I haven't had one I hadn't liked yet. You can get a variety pack on their website where they'll just send you a sort of series of different kinds of boxes. Or if you want to mimic whatever apocalypse preparation I have going on here, I'm sure we won't stop you. Magic Spoon is even backed by a 100% happiness guarantee. So if you order the cereal in, try it out, and decide that you don't like it, they'll refund your money, no questions asked, because we're both pretty confident that you'll love it. So once again, link in the description, magicspoon.com/Wendigoon, or discount code Wendigoon at checkout to get $5 off. You don't want to miss out. Thank you all so much for watching the ad. Thank you so much to Magic Spoon for sponsoring this video. It really does mean the most. Hope you all check them out. Link in the description. We are back to the video. We are going to go ahead and get into it, but as always, thank you for watching. Now, most are familiar with people like David Koresh, or the infamous way that this standoff would eventually end. However, what a lot of people aren't aware of is why the Branch Davidians were in a compound just outside of Waco, Texas in the first place. So to begin, we're going to go all the way back and talk about the origins of the Branch Davidians. The Branch Davidians trace their roots back to the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Now, it will become very clear in a moment that the beliefs of the Davidians do not align with the beliefs of the Seventh-day Adventists. So just to clarify, the beliefs I'm about to talk about do not represent the religion as a whole. In the 1920s, a man emerged from the Seventh-day Adventist Church by the name of Victor Houteff. One of the focuses of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, at least among the members that I know personally, is a focus on the book of Revelations and the imminent coming of Jesus Christ. It's believed by many that in the book of Revelations, it says that Jesus Christ, the Son of God, will come to earth and then take the believers in God back to heaven with him. Victor decided to take this a step further and determine the actual figures who were mentioned in Revelations. See, in the book of Revelations, there is a lot of language that is heavily debated as either being symbolism or literal representations. From the 7 seals of judgment being poured out on the earth to the 144,000 who will be left here after Christ's return, there seems to be a lot left up to general interpretation, and Victor was not okay with this. Victor decided that he was going to determine the identities of the figures mentioned in Revelations and make the preparations for Christ's return. Victor wrote a manuscript regarding these beliefs called the Shepherd's Rod. He passed it around to several church leaders who all seemed disinterested in his ideas. And after repeatedly berating leaders of the church to believe what he's saying, he was eventually disfellowshipped from the Seventh-day Adventist Church in 1930. At this point, however, he had managed to sway enough people to join him by the time that he was removed from the church, so he began to form his own religious offshoot known as the Shepherd's Rod. The Shepherd's Rod was officially organized in 1934 and shortly thereafter began calling themselves the Davidians. This is because in the Old Testament, King David is mentioned as being a righteous king and his offspring would be the ones to inherit the earth. Victor, believing himself and his followers to be those offspring, referred to themselves as Davidians. In April of 1935, the Davidians purchased a piece of property just outside of Waco, Texas, which they named Mount Carmel. Mount Carmel comes from an Old Testament story in which the prophet Elijah challenged the prophets of the god Baal to a competition to see whose god was real. A name, while at first symbolic, would become much more literal in the coming years. Initially, there was about 125 people at Mount Carmel. However, these numbers would grow rapidly, as did the property. The property had massive dairy farms and gardens, as well as schools for children and even a sanitarium. Victor also began various mission trips to begin to spread his word of determining who the true followers of God were. And while not all of them lived at the property, in 1950 it's believed that up to 100,000 people were a part of the Davidian religion. In 1946, a man by the name of Benjamin Roden joined the church at Mount Carmel. He had a more unique and steadfast approach when it came to his interpretation of Scripture. This caused several people within the Davidians to begin following the teachings of Roden specifically. This would manifest itself when in 1955, Victor suddenly died without warning. After Victor's death, his wife Florence Houteff would take over. Florence and Benjamin did not get along, primarily because of Benjamin's unique take on Scripture. See, Benjamin believed in the apocalyptic ideas of the Davidians. However, he believed that the Scripture itself was more malleable and subject to change over time. He said that this interpretation of Scripture was given to him by God, or the branch, which is another reference to the Old Testament, so his followers began to refer to themselves as Branch Davidians. So keep in mind at this point, the Branch Davidians are 2 degrees of separation from the original religion. When Florence took power, Benjamin Roden and his followers left in their newly defined Branch Davidian group, and in 1959 became their own thing. Florence, who still maintained leadership...
Bruh, I mean, so you can just branch off? I'm gonna just take this and I'm gonna just add this and we're just gonna create something new. That's always been odd to me about religion. Like, what do you mean you branched off? What does that mean? What do you mean? Branched off and did what? preach the same thing, right? You just started, like, we just opening up another building, because how you starting something new?
Power, Benjamin Roden and his followers left in their newly defined Branch Davidian group, and in 1959 became their own thing. Florence, who still maintained leadership of the original Davidians, as well as the property of Mount Carmel, said that she had received a revelation from God that on April the 22nd of 1959, the world would end. Or more specifically, the events of Revelation would begin, but same thing. Her followers believed her, and they all joined together at Mount Carmel, to which, when April 22nd passed, the world didn't end. Shocking, I know. This created distrust among the group, and from there they began to fracture. After this fracture and Florence's loss of power, Benjamin Roden stepped back in.
That's how you be knowing it's not a jug. It's like, you know, when I hear about these type of, I'm like, I wonder if the person who started it like to jug everybody. Like, they knew what they were doing. Like the late night pastors on with the infomercials. But no, like, she thought that she got that message and she thought it was going to happen. And then when it doesn't happen, you know, it's so interesting to me because I have a friend who's super churchy. I'm not going to say I don't even know how to, I don't know if it's its own religion. I don't know what it is. But they believe in something that they have a hard date on when the world is ending and when the Savior's coming to collect them. And I asked him, like, what happens if it don't? He look at me crazy, like, what are you talking about? Boy, it's happening. If my folks say it's happening, it's happening. So I'm like, damn. It's just like, how do you, when it doesn't happen, what happens to your brain the next day, y'all? If anybody's watching who's that happened to, let me know. How does your brain function? I understand the distrust, but then to jump right back into another group, that be the part that's like, because I've seen that, like, all right, y'all let me know.
After this fracture and Florence's loss of power, Benjamin Roden stepped back in and purchased the property of Mount Carmel for the newly defined Branch Davidians. So Davidians buy property, Branch Davidians separate during the property, Davidians lose property, Branch Davidians come back. Now keep in mind, the group at this point was much smaller than Victor's original Davidian religion. Less than 100 people were probably with him at this time. And when Benjamin died in 1978, similar to Victor, his wife took over. Lois Roden ran the cult normally for a few years until in 1981, when a man by the name of Vernon Howell joined the Branch Davidians. Shortly after joining, this new member Vernon became very close to Lois. Vernon was a very charismatic man. Not only was he a good public speaker, but he was also a musician who would lead the group in song. Furthermore, he claimed to have his own revelations from God regarding the meaning of Scripture. This, if you'll remember, falls in line with the Branch Davidian idea. The two were so close, in fact, that according to members of the Branch Davidians, they began to have an affair when Lois was in her late 60s and Vernon was in his early 20s. This was another one of
Okay. I don't think I have to say anything. Because I know you fucking lying. You telling me the 60-year-old was getting off with the 20? With the buck? But it's religion, so it's okay. It's okay. Duh.
If you'll remember, falls in line with the Branch Davidian idea. The two were so close, in fact, that according to members of the Branch Davidians, they began to have an affair when Lois was in her late 60s and Vernon was in his early 20s. This was another one of Vernon's revelations, as he said the child that they would have together would be the chosen son of God. Lois's son, George Roden, as you can imagine, hated Vernon a lot. Not only did George consider Vernon's teachings bizarre even by cult standards, but the whole affair with his mom thing probably didn't help. Members of the core Branch Davidian group began to lose faith in Lois, again probably in part because she was giving so much faith to Vernon. So in 1983, her son George Roden took over. One of his first orders of business was remove.
Here we go. Here's the part where I get invested. So here we are. All of this done happened before I was born. Here comes 83. This is where my ears are like, what's going on in the planet that I live in? Because once 83 hit, I'm in this motherfucker. Now I want to know what's going on this motherfucker. And here we are. Now we about to know what's going on. The sun took over 83. Boom, they're off.
Her son George Roden took over. One of his first orders of business was removing Vernon from his place of power. See, Lois had allowed Vernon to do his own teachings to the side of the regular teachings that she would give. And because of that, as is now the third or fourth time it's happened in this story, Vernon started to garner his own following. So George, not wanting a repeat of what his own father Benjamin did, cut out Vernon's story time. For like a year, Vernon just kind of lived in proximity to George. I mean, they're still in the same building at Mount Carmel. But presumably during this time, Vernon drove George insane. Not only was Vernon still presumably teaching people in secret, but he would also undercut some of George's messages. And the two hated each other to such a degree that whenever part of the building caught on fire in 1984, George immediately blamed Vernon. And Vernon said that, I don't know, maybe God did it. Which, it's wild to imagine two cult leaders who are kind of forced to live with each other, and something bad happens to one of them, so the other one's like, I don't know, maybe God hates you. Did you ever think of that? Over the course of this argument, George and his own followers forced Vernon and his followers to leave at gunpoint. So Vernon and his believers left for a while, and George Roden renamed Mount Carmel to Rodenville. You know, the cult story's getting good when they rename a small compound after themselves. For 3 years, with Vernon and his followers staying on a different side of town, they kept having these petty squabbles with each other. George would show up to do business on this side of town, and then Vernon would conveniently be doing business right next to them, and then George would witness to this group of people, and then Vernon would show up right afterwards. This came to a head when, in 1987, Vernon went back to the Mount Carmel, now renamed Rodenville, compound, and according to witnesses, while there, George Roden dug up the body of a Davidian who had died 20 years ago, because, they had their own cemetery on the property, and challenged Vernon to a competition of who can raise the dead. This is where the Mount Carmel joke about Elijah challenging the other prophets comes back into play. George would later say that he was just moving the bodies for some reason. And supposedly right after this challenge, Vernon went to the police and reported George for defiling a corpse. The local sheriff's department said they can't prosecute or perform a real investigation unless they had something like photographic evidence. So shortly after this, in November of 1987, Vernon and 7 of his followers, armed with rifles, broke into the Rodenville compound.
Do y'all hear this? This is the same group. These are the same people with the same beliefs. The same foundational beliefs that they have decided to just throw their own stuff on and make it their own, and then they split. That's just how I see it all. That's how I always see religion, man. It's just how are there so many groups of the same thing that don't believe the same thing? It's just this group believe 2 more things than this group, or this group believe, but we're the same. These are the same people. They done created this world that they think is bigger. They think that their world is the only world because they obviously believe that they are the chosen people of God. So they believe that their world is really the only world. The rest of us, me on YouTube, that ain't real to them. It ain't real to them. This is nuts. Why y'all bitching so much at each other? Just for control of a couple. Power is a drug, man. That shit is a drug for real, man.
7 of his followers, armed with rifles, broke into the Rodenville compound. According to
you trying to see if y'all can raise the dead, but y'all gotta show up with guns. If you can raise the dead, motherfucker, you can Stranger Things somebody out the fucking way. You can 11 somebody if you raising the dead and shit. Come on, man. What are we doing here?
7 of his followers, armed with rifles,
this man-made
broke into
gun.
the Rodenville compound. According to them, they were doing this in order to get evidence of the exhumed body, and claimed that the weapons were just there in case they were attacked. Lois Roden had also died the year before in 1986, and some believe this may have given David the go-ahead to conduct a violent raid on the compound, but that's up to opinion. While making their way into the compound, they were spotted by George and a gunfight broke out. The gunfight lasted about half an hour before the police arrived, and as soon as the police showed up, Vernon and his men threw down their guns. During the fight, no one was killed, but Vernon had been hit. In the trial that followed, Vernon claimed that he was there investigating suspicious activity that concerned himself, and that over the course of the gunfight, he was just firing bullets in the air in order to protect himself and never meant to hurt George or anyone else at the compound. All of Vernon's men were acquitted, and Vernon himself was given a mistrial. Also, after it was over, members of the jury hugged Vernon because he was just that much of a likable guy, apparently. And as soon as the court proceedings were over, he invited the prosecution over to his place for ice cream. George, in the meantime, was held in contempt of court because he had said such horrific things to the judge and legal teams there that they considered it a threat and indecency. After being released, George found out that several of his followers had converted over to Vernon's teachings. Vernon had got under George's skin to such a degree that in 1989, whenever one of George's own followers approached him and said that he had a new revelation from God, George killed him with an axe because he was convinced it was Vernon trying to get at him somehow. So, with George now in jail for murder and the majority of George's followers...
What? How did my boy just breeze by? My boy Wendigoon, bruh, bruh. He took an axe to Buddy because Buddy just said, hey, I'm sick. So you telling me I'm 6. I'm my son's age. I'm having a blast. Huh? Having a blast. South side of Atlanta. Living on Guyby Road. And somewhere on a compound. You know what? I don't even know it was a compound that they was on. My boy getting an axe taken to him. Then my boy gets axed to death because of words. Man, words are powerful, man.
Skin to such a degree that in 1989, whenever one of George's own followers approached him and said that he had a new revelation from God, George killed him with an axe because he was convinced it was Vernon trying to get at him somehow. So, with George now in jail for murder and the majority of George's followers following into Vernon's teachings, Vernon just walked his way back into Rodenville and renamed it Mount Carmel. Vernon, now the unchallenged leader of the Branch Davidians, which is at this point an offshoot of the Branch Davidians, so we're 3 degrees of separation now, Vernon renamed himself to David Koresh. David being the reference to King David, the one who the Davidians took their name after, and Koresh being the Hebrew pronunciation of King Cyrus the Great, the king who freed the children of Israel. With his new group, David began his own interpretation of the book of Revelations. In the book of Revelations, the Lamb of God is mentioned as returning to earth. Now, this is widely believed across the majority of Christian doctrine to be a reference to Jesus Christ, the Son of God. However, David's revelation with this was that the Lamb of God was someone separate from Jesus. And as a matter of fact, Christ is not exclusive to the Son of God, but is instead a name given to any sons of God who carry on his prophecy and message. David believed himself to be one of these Christ.
My boy just got to make up a way to make himself. Am I tripping, y'all? Is that just not what they be doing? Interpretation, boy. That interpretation thing is. My boy just interpreted something to make himself put himself right there. I'm right here. I'm right next to him. Yeah, I'm right next to him. Man, interesting.
Who carry on his prophecy and message. David believed himself to be one of these from Jesus. and as in with to be a reference to Jesus Christ, the Son of God. However, David's revelation with this was that the Lamb of God was someone separate from Jesus. And as a matter of fact, Christ is not exclusive to the Son of God, but is instead a name given to any sons of God who carry on his prophecy and message.
So basically, I'm a son of God. Basically, my nickname is Christ, is what he's saying. It's just a name given. Like, you're not a son of God, you're a Christ. Is that what that's what I'm hearing? So I would be a Christ. I would be okay, all right.
David believed himself to be one of these Christ, and more specifically, the Lamb of God mentioned in Revelations. So because of that, in his teachings, David told his followers that they were to be the ones to fight the armies of Babylon, or the wicked world that would enclose around them during the final days of
Now
Earth.
My folks is going to war.
What are those people here are people, well, you know what they think of me? They think I'm the Son of God.
Do they?
Yeah.
Is he the Son of God?
I hope he is.
This belief would shape the majority of...
What my boy mean they think? See, he look like he jugging. See, he looked like Brad Pitt would do well at playing him in a role, because these people think I'm the son of. What do you mean? Why aren't you talking like you are?
Well, you know what they think of me? They think I'm the Son of God.
Do they?
Yeah.
Is he the Son of God?
I hope he is.
This belief
Well, you
would...
got Asian, white, and black in the car.
Do they?
My boy had the clip loaded.
Is he the Son of God?
My bad. My boy got all of us. my boy, who in the back seat? My boy got all of us.
I hope he is.
This belief would shape the majority of their actions going forward. See, the entire Waco incident is incredibly misattributed, and we're going to talk about why that is in a little bit. But the majority of news sources just say that David believed himself to be God, and that the Branch Davidians, or more accurately the Koreshians, because again this is a removal from even the Branch Davidians, were simply a doomsday cult who believed in the glory of their own death during the end times. The reason that narrative is pushed so hard is because it helps justify what would happen later. But these Branch Davidians did not have some idea that taking one's own life would cause some greater purpose or state of existence.
I think in the case of the Davidians, if people had listened carefully to their rhetoric with an ear toward an understanding of religious apocalyptic language, would probably not have been worried about them using these weapons against their neighbors.
As a matter of fact, it was the opposite, and believed that it was their job as the Lamb of God to hold out till the very end. David's belief was that he was to build an army and prepare for the eventual coming war.
Would you use a gun if somebody came in here?
They come in here with a gun and they start shooting at us. What would you do? Tell me. Be realistic. This is America. This is not.
I can't remember which one was trying to raise the dead, but was it him? But if it was him, raise the dead. How about you raise the dead and have them fight your war? If you raise the dead, an army of dead, I'm pretty sure ain't nobody fighting nobody no more. Raise the dead. They come in here with guns. I'm just gonna raise. Why wouldn't you say? I don't even know if it was him. Let me. Hold on. I gotta hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Who's trying? Oh, okay.
What would you do?
Okay.
Tell me. Be realistic. This is America. This is not Australia. This is not Europe.
Okay.
This is not where a country overthrows a bunch of people, takes away their weapons so that the people cannot argue any issues. Did King David have swords? Did Jesus tell the apostles to carry a sword with you? Yeah.
And in 1989, he would begin to put praxis to that belief. David said that he received a revelation from God that he was to father several children, 24 to be exact, that would be the eventual leaders or judges in the end times. And to do this, he would have the children with the women in the congregation. Again, stating this all to be some higher purpose. And here's something I want to emphasize in my research, and this is something you can totally disregard or do your own research and say that I'm dumb about. Like I said, this is just opinion. But from everything that I've read and interviews I watched with him and members of the group and people who talked to him, I think David really believed what he was saying. And you may think, yeah, duh, every cult member believes what they're saying. But not really. Most cult members, at least the ones that I have read and studied about for this job on YouTube, they're always trying to sell something or maintain a sense of dominance so that there's never a question of one's own servitude towards the cult leader. Right. And while I would normally just chalk up David to being another charismatic guy who likes to rule over people who he thinks are lesser than him, looking at his history, I think David truly believed his own hype. David was born to a single mother who was 14 years old and from a young age began to live with his grandparents. David had several learning disabilities and was relentlessly mocked for it at school. And I emphasize this whenever I talk about things like serial killers, and it needs to be resaid here. I am not saying any of this to justify or explain away the evils that David committed. Everyone wants to look at the story of the Waco standoff and either say good guys attacked bad guys or good guys were attacked by bad guys. And as with most things in life, it's not that simple. Right. While it's easier to look at the Branch Davidians as helpless victims of the evil government that came in and attacked them, and trust me, we will get to that, but I believe it to be more accurate to look at the actions of David Koresh as evil and the things he did to those around him as evil, but to also say that he legitimately believed in that evil. And again, the things that happened to him at a young age or his upbringing does not excuse anything he did later in life, but instead for us now analyzing it can provide a deeper picture or explanation. During this time period when he was bullied as a child and being raised in a Seventh-day Adventist church, he began to say that God would give him revelations regarding the Bible, and say things like God directly speaks to him. Supposedly, according to those around him, whenever he would preach from the Bible or of these revelations from God, his stutter would go away. A stutter that he was otherwise mocked and ostracized for. When David was around 19 years old, he went to the pastor of his church and said that God told David that he was to marry the pastor's daughter. The pastor told him to not approach him with that idea again, but in response to that, David got his daughter pregnant. So David went to leaders of the church and said that he felt that God wanted him to marry this girl, and in response, David was kicked out of the church. During the time that he was expelled from Mount Carmel, he went to countries like Israel and Australia and began to recruit people to come back and join him. Also, during this time, he found another girl who he said God wanted him to marry, and this time the father approved. This girl was 14 years old, and David was 29. Now, while it's legal for a 14-year-old to be married in Texas given the parents' permission, I do not care what the law says. That is disgusting. But given his entire...
That's why I fuck with Wendigoon, man. I fuck with the Goon, man, because he doesn't have to give his opinion. He doesn't have to. He didn't have to say that, but he did. Okay? He did, bro. He let us know that, hey, man, I'm a human, bro. I understand what I'm doing, but some shit I gotta speak on. That shit disgusting. So you need to know, as I tell this story in my head, I think this motherfucker's disgusting. And that's what I need. Huh? That's what I need. I need to know that we all know this motherfucker's disgusting. All right, that's all. That's all.
Care what the law says. That is disgusting. But given his entire history and eventual destination, there never seems to be a point where David was doing it as a farce. And while these things are absolutely bizarre and abominable to us, it seems to David this was all in line with his greater purpose. And again, I don't feel that any of this is excused. I don't feel this justifies any bit of it. As a Christian myself, I consider the majority of his actions to be blasphemous at best, but David didn't see it that way. If he was selling a lie, I don't think he was in on it. I say all of that because we're about to get into the main story of the Waco standoff, and it seems that because of these beliefs, David was in it for the long haul, and tragically, so were those around him. Now that the Branch Davidians were done with their infighting, their new wave of problems came from old members. Members who had left the Davidians either because they were upset.
My bad about now that we're going into a new chapter. I just had a long, bro, man. My boy who I was telling y'all, who, you know, we have these conversations. I just be wanting to understand. So that's just kind of, I just be lost about it sometimes, man. I just be lost. So excuse the rants, excuse the religion part rants, man. It's just a carry on. That's all.
Around him. Now that the Branch Davidians were done with their infighting, their new wave of problems came from old members. Members who had left the Davidians either because they were upset with David or just became disinterested in the entire religion, began to tell news sources and the police that there was severe child abuse occurring at Mount Carmel. Which, let me state, to be clear, yes, there was, legal or otherwise, having a child with a 14-year-old is gross. But regardless of how gross you or I think it was still legal by Texas law. So the stories of ex-members began to change. Instead of just the stories of David taking on a 14-year-old wife, it began to be stories of several of the adults in the compound abusing children as young as 8 years old. And it began to paint this picture in the media of a depraved group of monsters who trap children inside of this massive doomsday facility.
Around 1987, Mark Bro, a self-proclaimed prophet from Honolulu, Hawaii, joined the Branch Davidians at Mount Carmel. He was asked to leave in 1989 when he tried to take over the leadership of the Mount Carmel Center from David Koresh. Mark Bro vowed revenge. He called several international agencies and made allegations against David Koresh of adulterous sex, child abuse, and gun stockpiling. In 1992, Mark Bro was provided a golden opportunity to get his revenge when a disc jockey named David Jewell became embroiled in a custody battle with his wife, Sherry Jewell, a Branch Davidian who lived at Mount Carmel. Mark Bro approached David Jewell's mother to tell his sordid tales of sex, abuse, and guns.
At least it did to outsiders. See, the weird thing about the Branch Davidians when researching them is that comparatively, they were pretty normal. And I emphasize the comparatively. They still had a leader who fathered several children with different women, as well as married a 14-year-old in years previous, and he also said he was like the Lamb of God, kind of. But typically whenever you hear that, you would imagine, okay, I guess these members weren't allowed to go outside of the facility or to watch media from outside the facility. However, that wasn't the case. The entire group was free to come and go as they pleased. They all had vehicles. They would regularly drive out to town in order to eat dinner on the evenings. Pretty much all of them had jobs at different places out in town. David himself led a band that was made up of members from the church, and they would tour around at local bars and sing music. And no, not like spiritual hymns like rock music of the 90s. They would convert the auditorium.
Buddy thought he had the sauce. Buddy said, I live in the world where I'm a rock and roll star. What did y'all think this was? Y'all think Buddy on stage sing. My boy up there doing covers? All right, bro. Okay.
They would convert the auditorium into a theater and have movie nights, and they would regularly invite people from the town over to the compound and have these massive ice cream parties. They were active in the community of Waco and were known for having an open door policy where anyone could come and listen to David's teachings or just hang out if they wanted to. As a matter of fact, several people who joined the Branch Davidians were just people from the town who thought they were cool and wanted to live there. So whenever these allegations came out of child abuse, people in the town were pretty shocked. So in 1992, CPS did an investigation to see if any children were being abused. At the same time, a news channel from Australia came to Mount Carmel in order to interview David and figure out more about the Branch Davidians. CPS ruled that there was no evidence of child abuse and dropped the case. However, this investigation had left a sour taste in the once positively viewed Branch Davidian group, and public opinion slowly started to shift.
That for a couple of years. In fact, we had the Department of Human Services go out and interview some of the kids and whatever they could do. I had people go out with them to interview. To this day, we don't have a case that we can make against Vernon Howell or anyone for child abuse. Even though the news media here and other people kept saying this is what happened, a man from Australia said this is what happened. But we could never get them to give us anything more than just, we know that's what happened. You have to have proof.
People say you've been sleeping with the women here. Is that true?
No, only one. And she's tired of it. Now, I mean, she's tired of the accusations.
We also put to Koresh claims that he had sex with children and underage girls.
Did you do it?
No, I didn't do it.
Another detail about the Branch Davidians that's about to come into play is that the group really liked their guns, which, again, for the record, don't really have a problem with. And David was known for having several people in the community over to shoot a bunch of the cool weapons that he had amassed. In the investigation and trials that followed, there would be a lot of misinformation thrown around about the nature of these firearms, and specifically something known as the mag bag. The mag bag was the name of a business that was ran by one of the people within the Branch Davidians. For those that don't know, there's this thing you can do as an individual or a gun store called an FFL. An FFL, or Federal Firearms License, is essentially the license you get if you want to start making or selling guns. This is what every gun store does in order to legally sell guns and perform background checks. And it's also what individuals do who have a large collection and want to sell part of it and do the following background checks. Paul Feda had his FFL and used it as a revenue source where he would travel to local gun shows and sell guns, which the money would then go back to the Branch Davidians. This was all done extremely above the board. They had their official license, they would manufacture and register all of the guns legally, and then whenever they would sell part of their collection, which is something that people who collect firearms often do, the FFL allowed them to keep background checks and records of all the guns sold, and they kept files and everything was above board. A lot of the language that was used to demonize the coat would later paint this mag bag.
That is one thing about cults that I've noticed when I do watch the stories about the cults. There's always a guy that come in that's just real savvy, like business savvy, and they always know how to bring in a good solid stream of revenue into the cult. They don't be the leaders, but they be like, once the leaders find them, they be like, oh shit, this is the smart motherfucker I've been waiting on. He here. Turn us up, make us rich. And they be doing it. They be coming in and making it happen.
A lot of the language that was used to demonize the coat would later paint this mag bag as some kind of front. They would say, oh, well, there was supposed to be a gun store, and that's how they got weapons delivered to their address. But there was a gun store, and that's how they got weapons delivered to their address.
All gun dealers stockpile weapons. All gun shops stockpile weapons. We call those stockpiles an inventory.
How can one use firearms as an investment?
The guns that he was buying would go up in value, no question.
Okay. And do you know other people who do that?
Yes, sir.
It's not uncommon by itself, is it?
No.
It was a hobby for the men to build rifles and then register them and then sell them at gun shows, and again, all legal. However, this came into question when in February of 1992, a UPS worker was delivering a package to the mag bag, or in other words, Paul's FFL, when according to him, a box fell open and he saw inside several training grenades as well as black powder, among other various gun pieces. Now, this is not something out of the ordinary. If you've ever been to a gun show, dummy grenades are a very popular sell because, it's a little toy grenade and people think they're neat. And the Branch Davidians would load their own ammunition, which is where the black powder came from, and the assortment of other gun stuff that they were stocking up on. However, when this UPS driver reported to the local sheriff's department that there was suspicious items in the package he was delivering, that message got passed on to the ATF. The ATF, or the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, are the bureau that regulates anything to do with alcohol, tobacco, firearms, or explosives. If it sounds weird to group tobacco and explosives together in the same group, that's because the ATF essentially works as an extension of the IRS. See, if someone was to manufacture or purchase a fully automatic firearm...
Yo, this is a question I've always asked in my head. Because it's like, what does alcohol, tobacco, and firearms? Like, what? He's about to answer it, I believe. Let's do this.
See, if someone was to manufacture or purchase a fully automatic firearm or machine gun, then that would be illegal not because they're impossible to have, but because you have to pay your taxes for it.
Machine gun fire in itself is not evidence of illegal activity. It is legal to own a machine gun if the owner pays a $200 tax on the gun. But there was no evidence the Branch Davidians owned any machine gun at all. So, bottom line, the raid on February 28, 1993 was launched because the ATF merely suspected that the Branch Davidians might have a machine gun that they had failed to pay a $200 tax on.
Not only is the process very time-consuming...
You see how they pull the smallest little thing? We just need an excuse. We just need an excuse to get the warrant. They did that to me. I was like, wait a minute, y'all use that to get the warrant to come do all of this? To find nothing? Who the fuck had it out for us like that, man? Man, they do that though. We suspect he has a machine gun because we hear he has a bunch of guns and he didn't pay it. Did he pay a $200 tax ever? No? Well then come on, Judge. You got to sign that off. You know what? You're right. Go get him.
Failed to pay a $200 tax on.
Not only is the process very time-consuming and thorough on the individual purchasing it, but the weapons themselves are very cost-prohibitive, and that's a whole other discussion. So when the ATF heard that the Davidians were being delivered what was for them a normal restock of supplies, instead they heard dummy grenade, black powder, that can make an untaxed explosive, and they immediately began an investigation. On June the 9th, they began looking into the history of the Branch Davidians. And eventually on July the 30th of 1992, they sent 2 agents to a local gun shop to inquire about the Branch Davidians. The local gun shop said that they knew the Davidians for years and that they were always very above the board, and they even traded weapons back and forth on occasion. The ATF, not trusting their word, called the local sheriff, and the local sheriff got in contact with Koresh. Through this 3-way conversation, the sheriff and Koresh openly invited the ATF to come over, Koresh even saying that they're welcome to go through all their paperwork and weapons if they want to. The ATF, for some reason, denied this offer, which seems bizarre. I mean, even if you think they'll be hiding something, you would at least want to go check out the operation, especially if the sheriff's going with you. But instead, the ATF left and said there wasn't any headway made. Shortly after this, the ATF began renting a house across the road from Mount Carmel, under the guise that they were a group of college students who were just renting the house for the semester. What's funny is even on the most, pro-government websites that give this account of events, they all list that the ATF's cover was awful. They're supposed to be college students, right? But they're all driving these brand new matching vehicles. None of them ever go off to school. None of them ever are enrolled or do anything.
This is what I don't be understanding about the feds, bruh. How is it you guys have a long history of botching operations, bruh? Just being bad at it. Why is there such a history of that? How does that continue to happen? It's happening now. We're experiencing it now. It's just like, how is this still happening? I thought y'all would have had all of everything worked out now. Like, what do you mean they're driving the same cars and not going to school, but they're college students? Nobody thought that that's not going to work. All right, man.
None of them ever go off to school. None of them ever are enrolled or do anything in the local community. Oh. Not to mention they're all like 30-year-old dudes. One of these ATF agents, Robert Rodriguez, posed as an undercover agent and joined the Davidians. And by joined, I mean he would walk across the street and listen to a couple of their sermons and then come back. It turns out early on, David figured out that Robert Rodriguez was undercover, but didn't say anything and just let him be a part of what they were doing. Again, David had already invited the ATF in before, so it's not like he was scared that they were going to see something. Right. Rodriguez eventually filed his findings within Mount Carmel, and they were something else. Rodriguez said that he had found lower receiver parts, as well as aluminum blocks and fake grenades. Which, as already established, to explain the absurdity of the legality, and for YouTube, this is airsoft, I guess, I don't know. This is an AR-15 modeled to look like an M16, very similar to the same semi-automatic rifles that David and the Davidians would have had around this time. Within the realm of legality, the part of the weapon that is legally the gun itself is the receiver. On an AR-15 like this lower piece is the receiver, and this is just a hunk of metal. The reason being there has to be one piece that is serialized and transported to the individual, so the block that holds the trigger is often considered the receiver part. On the AR-15 specifically, any mil-spec AR-15 shares the same part dimensions. So you can take any receiver that you have and then combine it with the other pieces.
Wait, these motherfuckers like Legos? Now, I knew you could buy aftermarket parts for guns. I didn't know you could swap out parts on guns, meaning, you know, I'm thinking it's just like any other thing. There's a company that makes custom parts for each model gun. You know what I mean? I didn't know you could just swap out shit like that.
Any mil-spec AR-15 shares the same part dimensions. So you can take any receiver that you have and then combine it with the other pieces of a barrel or whatever other assembly you're working with and create your own rifle from there. It's kind of like Legos. For those that are familiar with firearms, it's very common for someone to buy a receiver and then build out the rest of the gun however they want it, because the receiver is the only part that matters. And it was very common, as proven by records, for the Davidians to order a bunch of receivers and then build out the rifles and then sell them again legally at gun shows. Okay. The ATF looked at this report that said there are receivers laying around and said, but what if this time, for the first time, they decide to use those receivers for something nefarious? Because if you were going to illegally convert your weapon to be fully automatic, you would have to damage and alter the receiver itself. And even though they had a long history of never doing that, the ATF decided that this time it means they're making illegal weapons. That would be like if I walked into your house and then saw steak knives on your kitchen counter and immediately assumed that you were going to stab me to death, because that's apparently the only function of a steak knife. If it sounds weird for me to show examples and to go into that amount of detail regarding the legality, just know that this was the justification for the ATF's later actions.
In a word, what the search warrant found was gun parts. It was the duty of the ATF to show that those gun parts were owned with an intent to create illegal weapons. I'm not a lawyer or a judge, but my reading of the warrant does not convince me that intent was there.
Also, listening to the rest of Rodriguez's report was painful.
The affidavit describes how an undercover agent had observed the upper and lower receivers of disassembled AK-47s. The AK-47 has a one-piece receiver. There are no separate upper and lower receivers on an AK-47. Obviously, Agent Aguilera didn't have a clue, and Magistrate Green failed to notice.
They list.
Shit. What do you mean? What does that mean? What does that mean?
47s. The AK-47 has a one-piece receiver. There are no separate upper and lower receivers on an AK-47.
What does this mean right here?
Obviously, Agent Aguilera didn't have a clue, and Magistrate Green failed to notice.
They listed that as their justification for a search warrant, along with a noise complaint from a neighbor. A few months before this, a neighbor had reported to the local sheriff's department that he had heard what sounded like full auto fire coming from Mount Carmel. What the ATF did not mention in their request for a search warrant is that this was already followed up on by the local sheriff, who investigated and saw it was just the guys firing a trigger really fast. But the ATF left it in, implying that the Davidians had unregistered machine guns. The ATF received their search warrant that must be carried out by February the 28th of 1993. The behavior of the ATF during this time is very odd. They began to amass reports from local journalists of the Branch Davidians abusing children, and used that as part of the reason that they should search the property for illegal firearms.
My investigations convinced me that David Koresh was guilty of statutory rape. But I don't understand why 2/3 of the search warrant is about child abuse and statutory rape when the ATF has no jurisdiction over those offenses.
Furthermore, whenever David Koresh bought the property, he reported to the local sheriff's department that he had found a meth lab that someone had set up on the outskirts of the property. So the sheriff's department came, picked up the meth lab, and there was no issues. However, the ATF cited this as evidence that they might be making meth. So why would the ATF, a bureau that's dedicated to the registry and tax filing of things like tobacco and firearms, be investigating reports that have been disproven by CPS of child abuse, along with things like meth making, which is, for one, a DEA problem, and two, no evidence of, if anything, evidence against, since David called the police to get rid of it. As a matter of fact, why any of this, right? Because it's not uncommon for an FFL to order gun parts and then build and legally sell weapons. So why all of a sudden decide that it's a big deal and then act so coy about it, refusing to step foot on the property unless it's an undercover agent? Well, as many have since pointed out, the reason is publicity. And the reason the ATF would want good publicity at this time is because of a little incident known as Ruby Ridge. To give a very brief overview.
Y'all sent me here after Ruby Ridge. That's what y'all said. Now that you did this, you gotta go do Waco.
A little incident known as Ruby Ridge. To give a very brief overview of a topic that deserves its own video. In August of 1992, the ATF was doing an investigation into a man named Randy Weaver, who supposedly created 2 short-barreled shotguns. Once again, for those that don't know, rifles and shotguns have to be a certain legal barrel length, shotguns 18 inches and rifles 16 inches, so if this rifle were to say have a barrel that was down here, that would be a felony. Similar to the machine guns I explained earlier, it's only a felony if you don't pay the tax. After the ATF determined that Randy Weaver had sawn the barrels off of 2 shotguns, he was given a court date to which he missed, most likely because the date was rescheduled, and Randy, who lived off the grid, wasn't exactly one to check his mailbox. One night, again in August of 1992, U.S. Marshals came to Randy's property, a property known as Ruby Ridge.
It's crazy that these things were happening at the same time. Like, this is nuts. This is nuts. And I'm just alive. I'm just 9 and 10. You know what I mean? Having a blast. And this is happening. Ruby Ridge in Waco is occurring.
2 U.S. Marshals came to Randy's property, a property known as Ruby Ridge, in order to arrest him. Upon arriving there, the dog began to bark at them, to which the marshals shot, insert shooting dog joke here. And Randy's son, Sammy Weaver, who was following his dog outside, just saw a random guy in the woods shoot his dog, so naturally, Sammy shoots back. A gunfight ensued and Sammy was killed along with an agent. This resulted in a 2-week standoff where negotiators were given false information about what even happened, thinking that the people inside of the cabin just fired on federal agents, when in actuality the agents shot first and didn't identify themselves. and culminated when a sniper named Lon Horiuchi began to fire at Randy as he walked out to his shed in order to get the body of his son. Lon continued to fire shots at Randy as he ran to his house, with one of the shots going through the door and hitting Randy's wife, Vicky Weaver, as she held their child. Randy, now fearing for the life of his other children, not expecting the FBI to just start shooting at them, surrendered himself along with his 2 children in fear that they'll keep shooting. So in the end, the FBI and the ATF had killed a mother and son over 2 short shotgun barrels. It cannot be overstated how hated the ATF was at this point in time. Movements and protests began calling for the ATF to be destroyed. And in the midst of all of this, they hear the story of a supposed group of child abusers who are manufacturing illegal weapons. And they view this as their ticket back to the top. Now, I understand everything that I just said is opinionated and subjective. However, the majority of people who are close to the case agree with that opinion, and that explains why everything they do has to make that narrative fit. That's why they go to local newspapers and get stories of child abuse. That's why they use disproven information like the noise complaint to justify there being illegal weapons on the property. That's why they say they're making meth, because it further vilifies this evil cult. And I want to clarify, I'm not saying all of this to imply that anyone who works in government or any 3-letter organization is inherently evil. All of my friends and everyone that I've talked to within those organizations universally agree that Waco was a horrific tragedy. As with all of my videos, this isn't some push to make you upset. This is a look at an event that happened in the past so that we can more properly prevent things like this, or at least understand them as they happen in the future. And I'm not implying that everyone on the government side in this tragedy is some diabolical ghoul, or that the Davidians were patron saints. And I still hold fast that David Koresh was a wicked man who led people astray, regardless if he believed he was doing the right thing or not. And that several leaders on the opposing side were performing wicked actions, regardless if they believed they were doing the right thing or not. And on both sides, we see what happened.
We on the same page. We on the same page so far. WG, let's rock.
Regardless if they believed they were doing the right thing or not. And on both sides, we see what happens when an individual has just enough of a twisted will and just enough people willing to follow orders. In the ATF's request for a search warrant, they said the reason that they have to raid Mount Carmel directly is because David Koresh never comes out of the compound. I can only say that this is willing ignorance. Not only did they have people across the street watching the compound every day, but they also had an inside man who would have plainly seen that David Koresh performed with his band several nights a week and went out to eat and work several days a week. This decision would be heavily scrutinized later, as instead of arresting a potentially dangerous individual when he was out on his own, they were now bringing that danger to a facility that they knew had several civilians and children. The day before the raid was scheduled to take place, on February the 27th, the Waco Tribune-Herald ran a report called The Sinful Messiah. This openly accused David of several of the things the ATF had mentioned in private, like the multiple accusations of child abuse, which again I'm not claiming him to be innocent of, but it seems the ATF did not approve of this move because, you know, the day before you raid someone, probably not a good idea to put them on edge. The ATF would also later claim that the reason they performed the raid on February 28th is because they had to move their timescale up because of this report being published. However, that is not true because, as mentioned earlier, February 28th was the deadline for the raid itself. And plus, in the days before February the 28th, the ATF had set up a mock course of the Mount Carmel compound at a local military facility and had been running routes training.
All of it for $200. This is, bruh, when they got it out for you, bruh, they gonna figure out how to get to you. And they gonna do a very sloppy job of cleaning it up. Sloppy. I mean, you're going from Ruby Ridge to thinking this is how you redeem yourself, and you immediately go slop. Let's go slop. Is this where fed slop comes from? You just go straight sloppy. This is nuts. Do better.
in the days before February the 28th, the ATF had set up a mock course of the Mount Carmel compound at a local military facility and had been running routes training the course of the building itself, so they knew what they were doing. It's interesting to note how on paper this is just a search warrant, as in someone comes to the door, serves a warrant, and then does a search. However, it seems the training that the ATF had, as well as the way they pulled up to the scene, implies that they were never planning to carry out a peaceful search in the first place, and instead were treating it much more like a military operation. A problem that could have been solved with a couple of agents just carrying out a normal search warrant or following up on Koresh's offer months ago was now being treated like an armed assault against foreign invaders. With the agency backed into a corner and their reputation at stake, it seems they were determined to fix the problem.
But, okay, the reputation of what? They've been messing up forever, and they still been holding. It's like who over there is believing all of this shit? Who is actually believing that they're in danger of being shut down and, oh, we got to make ourselves look bad? Who's doing the PR at the Fed? With the feds? Who's doing the Fed PR? Who's doing the ATF, the FBI, any alphabet boy? Who's doing it? Because them boys ain't went nowhere yet. They ain't went nowhere yet. It don't matter. They've done tons of damage, caused tons of carnage, and they still over us. So I don't know. I don't know who over there is like, we got to redeem ourselves. The public is going to.
Into a corner and they're.
Y'all let me know. I get it if we all come together and. So I guess every incident, and maybe somebody's thinking, damn, maybe this is the one time we mess up and they all come together and get rid of us. I don't. Maybe.
Reputation at stake, it seems they were determined to fix the problem that they had created. And when your only tool is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. The raid began on the morning of February the 28th, 1993. A local reporter had been tipped off that the raid was about to take place. So while driving towards the area, he pulled over and asked a postman if he knew how to get to the Branch Davidian compound because a big ATF raid was about to go down. Unbeknownst to that reporter, the postman that he just asked was David Koresh's brother-in-law, another Branch Davidian. So Koresh's brother-in-law hops in his car.
Do y'all hear this? You know, bruh, how does that happen? How do you stop the postman and it just so happens? You know, I don't recall him I do recall him saying that people from town thought it was cool go down, but I don't recall him saying the whole damn town was a part of this cult. And it's just like, damn, the postman? You stopped the wrong postman, or you stopped the right postman. I don't know. Let's see which one.
Brother-in-law, another Branch Davidian. So Koresh's brother-in-law hops in his car, speeds to the compound, and warns everyone that a raid's about to happen. According to whatever the reporter said, it was going to be loud and violent, and everyone in Mount Carmel started to panic. Koresh ran to Agent Rodriguez, who, if you'll remember, is supposed to be undercover at this time, but David figured him out, and begins to beg Rodriguez to call the ATF and to call off the raid. Rodriguez plays dumb and slips out the front door. He says that as he was leaving, everyone began to pray. Also, to get across how ready the ATF was for a fight, not only did they roll up dozens of agents in full kit, but they also wrote their blood type on their wrist and neck in case they were shot and needed a quick transfusion. At this time, there were about 115 people within Mount Carmel. The women and children began to hide in their rooms while several of the men took up arms. Koresh and the others assumed that the ATF was going to come loud and was looking to make an example. It's here that we start to get into discrepancies, and normally I would tell the whole story in a straight run through of the official report and then go back and talk about the theory surrounding it. But this event is so long, I'm just going to hit the discrepancies as we get to them. Okay. Beginning with the question of who shot first. At about 9:45, the agents roll up in covered trailers and begin to surround the front door of the premises. Koresh comes outside with his arms up and tells them to stop because there's women and kids in there. While everyone is yelling back and forward, someone fires a shot. Now initially it was declared by all of the agents that one of the Davidians shot first. However, later reports would recant this. The two leading theories is that either one of the agents fired after seeing a Davidian holding a gun in a window, or that part of the ATF's dog kill team, who was sent forward, according to some of the reports I read, with the intention of shooting the dogs first, went forward and shot the Branch Davidians' dogs. Again, insert joke about shooting dog here. These dogs were shot by the agents, and this seems to be the most likely moment that would have happened. This caused the rest of the agents to erupt into gunfire, and the gunfight started. A big point in contention of deciding who shot first was the right door at the front of Mount Carmel. See, David was standing just outside of the door with his hands raised in the air, and in the initial gunshots, he was hit in the stomach and hand. He immediately ducked back inside of the door and closed it behind him. The rest of the shooting, or at least the vast majority of it, came from the upper windows of the compound. Reports would later say that David probably got shot whenever he went up to a different floor or began to engage the officers. However, the evidence on that front door shows several bullet holes, implying that the ATF fired at David while he was standing outside for a few seconds, which would mean they would have had to be the ones to take the first shots. This front door with this supposed evidence totally disappeared. Even after everything that went down, the left door was retained in evidence and in fine condition. The right door disappeared off the face of the earth. And
I know you lying. I know you lying. It's like they just can't get right. They cannot get right, man. And they know the more time that passes, it's just going to become lore. It's just going to become a part of a story. That's all. It's just going to become an interesting part of the story that nobody ever figures out. It makes the story good, though.
Evidence and in fine condition. The right door disappeared off the face of the earth, and according to one agent who later testified against his initial report, he said that he saw a group of investigators after the whole standoff was over, loading it into the back of a U-Haul. In the following congressional hearings, the door was never recovered. Crazy how evidence like a door can just fly away. Wayne Martin, one of the Davidians, called the local police and asked them to get on the phone with agents and to stop shooting, continuing to exclaim that they were shot at first and now the women and kids are in danger.
Yeah, the 75 men around our building and they're shooting at us in Mount Carmel. Mount Carmel? Yeah, tell them there are children and women in here to call it off. I hear gunfire. Who is it? Wayne. Tell me what's happening, Wayne. There are women and children in danger.
Right.
Wayne.
The hell you sitting here talking about I hear gunfire? The man just told you what's happening. God. You literally are saying I hear gunfire. That was him, right?
Children and women in here to call it off. I hear gunfire.
What the fuck? Stop asking me what's going on. Women, kids, danger. You hear gunfire. Call somebody.
Wayne. Tell me what's happening, Wayne. There are women and children in danger. Wayne. I'm under fire. I'm gonna call out. What? I'm gonna pull back. I have a right to defend myself. They started firing first.
During this initial gunfight, the first agent was shot whenever he tried to make his way around to the back of the compound and was hit by a shooter in a top window, and helicopters began low-flying back and forward, supposedly to draw attention away from the men on the ground. However, according to many of the survivors, these helicopters were shooting at them. Just as they had trained, the officers began putting up ladders on the front of the building in order to make their entry into the top floors of the compound, where they expected the majority of the weapons would be, according to Rodriguez's report. While gathering outside of the window, the three initial agents who crowded around it began to be shot at, before they throw a stun into the room and make their entry. During this entry, you can see where bullet holes are flying out of the wall, being shot from inside, and this results in another agent being hit and then falling off the roof. While not on video, according to the ATF, on entry another agent was killed, and they in turn killed a Davidian who fired at them. While searching for weapons, they were then ambushed by another Davidian, where 2 more agents were injured, and then that Davidian was killed. The agents then make their exit from the window. One agent hits his head and then falls down the roof, as the agents begin to take cover behind the Davidians' vehicles and return fire. This shooting continued at a high rate for 45 minutes, and only then slowed down because the agents started to run out of ammo. Even then, the gunfight itself continued, with the agents occasionally firing rounds for 2 hours. The sheriff, as well as others on the scene, say that the altercation only quit because they ran dry. Once they were out, the Davidians said that the ATF could come retrieve their wounded and dead, and on the ATF side, 4 agents had been killed and 16 were injured. On the Davidian side, 5 had been killed and several more injured, again including Koresh himself. The Davidians began to collect their dead and bury them in the cemetery on the property. While the men who buried their dead were walking back inside, one of them was shot and killed by the ATF.
Yo, this is crazy. This is nuts. They just said this was a 45-minute shooting over the past. So this is only a few hours and these folks already trying to bury folks? Going outside wide open, knowing that these folks want y'all head. I'm not understanding this. I'm not understanding this. Then y'all making agreements for them to come in and get there. What the fuck? At this point, it's war, ain't it? What you mean you coming in and get wounded? What do you... Y'all are shooting at a house filled with women and babies. Man, this shit don't be adding up to me sometimes, man.
Who buried their dead were walking back inside. One of them was shot and killed by the ATF. According to the ATF, this guy had decided to start firing at them, although this has never been confirmed. This makes a casualty count for the first day 6 Davidians and 4 ATF. As soon as this happened, it became a media storm. Initially, it was just this weird group in Texas who a few people knew about, who were being investigated on weapons charges by the ATF. But now it had become an open gunfight with 10 dead. So at this point, it was off to the races, with journalists and news crews from across the country showing up. The situation was then taken over by the FBI. The FBI took it over because once a federal agent is killed, it then becomes their case. Specifically, the situation was taken over by the FBI HRT, or Hostage Response Team. This was conveniently the same team who was at Ruby Ridge. In the initial hours, David began to call local news teams and began doing interviews and explaining what had happened. Of course, David maintained that they were fired upon first by the ATF. In response to this, the FBI cut the phone lines so that way David couldn't speak to anyone that they didn't want him to, and ran a phone line directly from the negotiators to him so that that was the only means of communication. However, what little David did manage to say became all the rage within the media frenzy. He talked about how they were fired upon first and how it was his right as an American to defend himself and to stand up to tyranny and blah blah blah. And many began to view the Davidians' actions as defensive violence. Over the following days, Koresh spoke to the FBI negotiators for hundreds of hours.
Defensive violence. I don't know if he meant that in a good way or a bad way. It sounds bad, but it sounds like it makes sense. Defense means you're on the defense. That means somebody on the offense is coming at you. So if I'm playing defense, it don't matter if it's violent or non-violent. It's defense. But the people started to view it as defensive violence. The defense is stopping the other people from scoring. So is it good or bad? Did he mean that as good or bad?
Over the following days, Koresh spoke to the FBI actions as to stand up to tyranny and blah blah blah, and many began to view the Davidians' actions as defensive violence. Over the following days, Koresh spoke to the FBI negotiators for hundreds of hours. He would talk about his family, he would talk about the Bible, he would ask about the negotiator's life.
If you die, you tell me, if you die from that wound, I want you to tell me what's going to happen.
Well, I'm not going to be around anymore, am I, to influence anybody, right?
Well, David, listen.
No, Jim, listen.
This has been painful for us. Come on.
Listen, Jim. There's nothing that hurts me more than being called a cult leader, all right? If I'm wrong, people like me don't deserve to live, okay?
Listen.
You understand me, Jim. If you let the people think. 'Cause, they're all scared around here now. Don't burn our building down.
No, we won't do that.
Don't shoot us all up. They've got to have that time.
But David, if you die, you're leaving your people helpless.
Look, they're God's people.
But if
I'm just an instrument, okay? I show them out of a book what God teaches. But it is for them to decide.
And for a while, they just existed in the stalemate, with the FBI encircling the compound and the Davidians inside, just waiting for something to happen. This is why earlier I was emphasizing the difference between a typical doomsday cult who's just anticipating the end, and the Davidians who were prepared to hold out until the end. Throughout the FBI's internal logs, Jonestown was constantly brought up. The negotiators and the FBI in general was not understanding the mental concept of what the Davidians were trying to say. They just assumed, oh, crazy religious cult here, do crazy religious cult thing over here.
Right.
And they were waiting at any moment for the group to either drink the Kool-Aid or go out in a blaze of glory. However, after several days, nothing happened. The group, who had provisions to wait out the war with Babylon, were just sitting inside waiting for the next move. Eventually, David said that he had a message for the American people, and if they played it on the news, then he would willingly surrender. The FBI kept up their side of the bargain and played the message. However, after it was played, David said that God decided he was not yet to come out.
He gave us his word that after the message was played...
Yes, but what if there is a higher power than you and I that speaks to an individual? If there is a God in this universe, and there's the laws of man and there's the laws of God, and this God that has led him all his life says to him to wait, what do you do?
We find no incidents, those of us who've listened to the negotiation tapes and studied the transcripts, of Koresh lying. On March the 2nd, he said he was coming out, and then said God told him not to. If any lies were told, it was that, and we would have to know what God said to Koresh in order to call that a lie.
Do you people believe that Koresh is actually talking to God?
Koresh believes he's talking to God.
This is again another...
It's crazy they won't say it. They won't say it. Do y'all think he talking to God or not? Yes or no? We know what he believes. We don't need you to reiterate that. We need to know what you believe. And they never, it's like they just stay away from the God talk. We can't put no hard lines on God, because if we say that he's not talking to God, oh my God, who do you think you are? How do you not know his connection? And you don't know you can't tell a man of God that he's not. Man. Funny thing, man.
Koresh believes he's talking to God.
This is again another discrepancy. One either views this as Koresh playing hooky with the FBI, or the FBI making things difficult. See, in the midst of all this, where David's explaining, why did you shoot at us? This is my vision from God. Can you play this message? The FBI was doing stuff like rolling tanks up to the compound and cutting off power to the entire facility, and just generally being crude.
They were mooning the women, for instance. They would drop their pants and bend over and bare their rear end to people that were looking out the windows, which was, not a situation that some of the women or even some of the men took too lightly, in the sense, well, do we want to send our children out to these kind of people?
Steve, every time we're aware of movement, we've told you about controlling these guys. I mean, if you got guys out there right now pulling their pants down, men that are mature, they're sticking their butts out in the air and flipping the finger.
Give me a moment. See, the guys that gravitate toward, riding in tanks, jumping out of airplanes and stuff like that are a little different mindset than you and I. I agree with you. Right? I agree. So when they get a chance to use a Bradley, probably half of them have never been into Bradley before.
It reminded me of a lot of kids in there.
Absolutely.
Having an opportunity to...
Hey, let's drive this baby and see how it works.
Sure, but somebody's got to be above these guys. Well, those vehicles and what they're doing do not show what is coming out of the mouths of some of you guys.
Regardless, for one reason or another, David decided he was not going to come.
The fans just tried to tell that man, those guys are just having fun. Okay, they never drove a Bradley. They're just out here having fun. That's all, man. Don't mind their bare asses. Don't mind the mooning. Don't mind that. Don't mind the tank rolling up. Don't mind that. They're just having fun. That's all.
Out. The negotiator asked if he could send out some of the children, and David said he'd be happy to send out anyone who doesn't want to be there. The ones that chose to leave were several mothers, as well as 19 children aged 5 months to 12 years old. That meant that 23 children were still inside the building. After this departure, about 98 people remained inside of Mount Carmel. The mothers were immediately separated from their children and arrested, and the children were immediately taken to be interviewed. Keep in mind, the media frenzy around this entire thing is the story of child abuse, and that the ATF and FBI are doing the heroic thing by trying to save these children from these monsters. So whenever the children were set down in question, they were asked about child abuse. Now, during the time of the standoff, it was seen as a 100% cut and dry evidence that the children said they were being abused by their parents and Koresh. However, there is no logs or records of any of this happening. As a matter of fact, according to people who were there and later testified, there was zero evidence that there was ongoing child abuse. Because the story at this point had not just escalated from Koresh being a creep to young girls into the idea that a bunch of the parents were being creeps. The story now was that as the standoff was going on, the children inside were actively being tortured, and the interrogators used leading questions to get vague answers that further justified this. David said that he wanted a video footage of himself and his followers so that
because you could easily ask a kid, were you being abused on the compound? That sounds drastic. No. Did your mother ever whoop you? I mean, yes. We got abuse. Let's run with it. Come on. Very vague. Just keep it vague. Don't ask how she hit her. It could be a thump. It could have been a punch. Have you ever been hurt on the compound? Yeah, I've been hurt. Abuse.
This. David said that he wanted a video footage of himself and his followers so that the outside world could see what they were about. So on day 9, the FBI sent in a video camera and the Davidians began recording.
And bringing these tanks and stuff around here, I tell you what, being an American first, I'm the kind of guy that I'll stand in front of it.
The FBI sent in a video camera and the Davidians began recording.
And bringing these tanks and stuff around here, I tell you what, being an American first, I'm the kind of guy that I'll stand in front of a tank. You can run over me, but I'll be biting one of the tracks. No one's going to hurt me or my family. That's American policy here. You could have arrested me any day as I jogged up and down this road. You could have arrested me going to town or going to Walmart. Waco was going to bear witness against the ATF. The two agents across the street over here, Robert Gonzalez, I love the guy. I was honest with him. I brought him into my home. He was going to stay here for 2 weeks. All this stuff you guys may want to avoid and deny. You know, he wanted to tour around the place. I promised him a tour. He could have talked to any of these guys around here, anybody. He was free to come and go as he chose. And I do not appreciate it, and never will I ever appreciate somebody coming here with 2 helicopters and cattle trailers and all that, and pushing people around with guns. Hey, I'll meet you at the doorstep any day, you know, and somebody will get hurt. If you want to keep playing that game, I'm talking to you. Somebody's going to get hurt. Because this ain't America anymore when the ATF has that kind of power to come into anybody's home and kick doors down and things like that.
Come on, man.
You know, I heard...
I feel it, man. I've been there, man. Damn, I've been there. I've been there, y'all. They kicked my fucking door in. Because of something somebody told them. And they wanted to believe it about my house. And they just... I have an infamous house in Clayton County. I have an infamous house in Clayton County, Georgia. And they wanted us, so we didn't get it. And they took the word of somebody and used that, and that damn sheriff, boy, we ain't gonna say his name. That damn sheriff signed that warrant. He signed it 3 times. They hit us 3 times, y'all. Nothing. We'll get to that one day.
And kick doors down and things like that. You know,
and man, it's so crazy because I got the lawyer and I got the money for the lawyer, and I'm thinking to myself, man, the lawyer is about to tell me And he's like, man, but you might not even chase that. That's not how that's gonna work, sir. It sounds good. That's not how that's gonna work. We just trying to make sure your ass don't go to jail. How about that? Cause all this you talking, nah, it ain't gonna. Nah.
I do understand. Someone reminded me of this. I do understand that one of the officers says his gun went off on accident, and that that was just like a signal and all that, But look, beside the point, ATF, you boys are wrong. Your practices, your habits, yeah. Drug dealers, fine. But even there's always a question. If there's any question whatsoever, the kids or women are involved, damn you, I tell you what, you keep your damn gun in your holster. You send a couple of big, brave, invincible kind of men, you let them knock on the door. If they're so damn involved to where they can risk their lives for the name of the law, then send them up bulletproof, put them in some kind of night armor or whatever, and let them knock on the door and ask the questions first. But no one's going to expect me, when they come busting in on my door with guns drawn and pointed in the air, and someone fires me, that I'm going to lay down and die for anybody. That just ain't going to happen in this country. You see this here? See, this is my family. It may not be like your family. It may not be like your family. This one here, he's my family too, right, Joseph?
Yeah.
Tell him, look in that camera and tell him what you think about it. Who's treated you good?
David.
Do you mind that, son? Huh? Do you love Joseph? Your best buddies?
Yeah.
You too, Damon? So, you guys, you do it your way, I do it my way. You got to argue with me, you catch me on the side of the road somewhere, you come and argue with me. You come point guns in the direction of my wives and my kids, damn it, I'll meet you at the door any time.
But you know what? There is a difference between my raid and their raid. No matter how we think of them, I don't know what they were doing that was illegal. We were doing illegal things. I was doing illegal things. So, it's just you wouldn't expect all that to happen for what I had going on. All right. And they did end up hitting me with a felony for bootlegging because we were burning our own music CDs and they took our towers, and that's how they made something stick. They hit us with the bootleg. They hit me. It was me. I keep saying us, but it was me. They hit me with the bootleg. But so there is a difference there. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like, okay, maybe Nolo, maybe they probably should have kicked your door in. I don't think so. But hey.
To my wives and my kids, damn it, I'll meet you at the door any time. And I'm sorry some of you guys got shot. But hey, God will have to sort that out, won't he?
And what brings you all the way from England, a nice lovely home of which I've seen and been in, what brings you to America, to a place called Waco, Texas, or Waco, Texas? Anybody want to speak first?
I've always wanted to know, to understand the Bible, and I wanted to know about the 7 seals. And I met somebody who could show me the 7 seals. I asked my pastors, my ministers. I was a former Seventh-day Adventist. Nobody could show me. And now I've found what I've been looking for.
The FBI chose to not follow through on their deal because they felt that the video would garner public support. At this point, with a week and a half under their belts and no development, infighting arose in the FBI. The negotiators said that they were talking to David as well as other members of the facility and that it takes time to get progress this way. And the HRT team said that that was too slow and that they need to speed it up. So the HRT began what I can only describe as psychological warfare. They started taking their tanks and just running over the Davidians' cars that were parked out front. And then through the night, they would shine spotlights at the building and play disturbing noises on loudspeakers. Like they would play variations of old music to the sounds of rabbits being murdered, and at one point, literally dolphin noises.
Yes, right here.
Mr. Ricks, is there a consideration to use psychological warfare? Have you discussed it at all?
I don't know what psychological warfare is.
It was reported in the paper that you would play loud music, keep bright lights on the compound all night to try to agitate the entire group. Is that a possibility?
We will not discuss tactics of that sort, but I would say the chances are minimal of doing that type of activity. Yes, ma'am.
Where do you get rabbits? Where do you get a collection of rabbits dying sounds from? Where you get that from, feds? Where y'all get that from, FBI? Where y'all get that from? Let us know. How y'all locate that? Nuts. This is nuts. This is nuts.
Day 7 finds reporters facing a banner reading, "God help us, we want the press." Reporters respond with a statement of their own.
God help us, we are the press!
Also, as the tanks were running over the cars, they kept running over the bodies of the people who were previously buried. And they just kept doing it, backing back and forth just to, I don't know, make them sad. And even if you're a staunch believer in the idea that the government's actions were justified and Koresh needed to be stopped by any means necessary, and I'm not even disagreeing with you on the idea that Koresh needed to be stopped.
Right.
However, what purpose does the whole playing dolphin noises serve? If their concern is that this guy is some crazy Jim Jones type who's going to kill everyone before he comes out of there, then what does playing sounds of rabbits being murdered accomplish?
Right.
All you're doing is making someone who you claim to be unstable. More sleep deprived and unstable.
The FBI push David or the rest of us to the limit. Did they want to create an incident? Did they want us to come out, crazy and start shooting so that they'd have an excuse to gun us down? We didn't know.
We realize that you have the ability, and it's not below you people to do something like to erase all evidences. Why do you have the press so far back? You can give me any kind of crap you want. I know, you know. The reason we're not talking to the press is you people have got to cover your butt from what you did, and that's what's going on here.
At this point, they cut all power and water lines into Mount Carmel. And while the Davidians had water tanks to ensure they would have reservoir of water if they needed it, 2 of them had been damaged and drained in the initial shootout, so the entire Davidian compound was down to 1 water tank. Again, another layer of stress added on to what was supposedly a very delicate situation. Around this time, 11 people left. Several of the children didn't want to leave because, as they could see initially, the parents were immediately arrested and the children taken to their own questioning. So the kids decided to stay while again 11 adults left. At this point, the FBI began bringing in religious leaders as well as cult experts to try to better understand the psychology of the people they were negotiating with.
When I first was asked to be involved as a member of the panel, I thought the main problem was going to be understanding the psychology of the people inside the compound. But as I got into it, I quickly became aware that the psychology of the people outside the compound was more important to an understanding of what happened.
It was unanimously decided by everybody that was brought in that the correct approach to a group of people who think that they are about to face the end of the world and the armies of Babylon is to not be the armies of Babylon. This went on for several weeks, with people being consulted on the news and being brought to the site and saying that violence isn't going to work against a group of people who are determined to fight violence at all costs. But meanwhile, around Fort Caramel, it was just a carnival. They were selling t-shirts, and there were ice cream vendors, and they were playing games with each other and taking pictures. There were protesters, someone dressed up a dog in an ATF shirt, and it was just so bizarre that during this massive standoff that you could just drive up and take selfies next to a bunch of federal agents Also, at this point, the FBI had pushed the press a few miles back at a place that they could still see the compound, but they couldn't hear or see any of the actions of the agents themselves. Again, the FBI HRT, who really wanted some action and were desperate to get it, began debating on April the 10th of what if we just snipe Koresh? What if he comes by a window and we just shoot him? Keep in mind, these were the same people at Ruby Ridge, truly a one-size-fits-all group of guys. But then they said that they shouldn't do that because they figured as soon as we kill Koresh, they'll all probably kill themselves, which again shows the lack of understanding of care between what the agents thought of them and what the Davidians thought themselves. However, the HRT wasn't the only one getting antsy. DC was getting a lot of pressure to wrap things up.
Special live call-in show here this morning. Listeners had strong opinions on how they think this tragedy should now be handled. A majority seem to want law enforcement to end it all quickly.
Good morning, Waco 100.
I vote for go in and just take him out.
Which, when you take a step back and think about it, is so stupid. You showed up, you instigated the violence, and I don't even mean the first shot. I mean, you drove armed people up to the front door. And then after the gunfight, they don't do anything, and you keep poking them with more stuff, and they keep not doing anything, and they're just standing around if we don't end this fast,
what?
It could get out of hand. Attorney General Janet Reno told Bill Clinton, the at-the-time president, that things were rapidly escalating. No, they weren't. And that children were being abused every day that they don't do something. Clinton initially...
Yo, do y'all hear this? She is telling the president that in the middle of a real deal outnumbered shootout, the people are in the house abusing children while the shootout is occurring. That was a long day of shootout. Let's abuse some kids. Look at her. She looks like she lies about shit like that. She looked like she just says things like that just to excite shit, just to get shit her way.
And that children were being abused every day that they don't do something. Clinton initially said, why can't we wait? And Reno said that would be too expensive. Because remember, kids, the only time the government cares about budget is when it's your life. When later asked about this, and after it was brought up to her that there was no evidence of children being abused during the standoff,
what'd she say?
She said that wasn't the actual reason she wanted to finish it. She wanted to finish it because she was afraid that other militias from across the country would show up and try to take back Mount Carmel. Okay, so Reno got the go-ahead, and they decided that they were going...
So she didn't even have to answer. She didn't even have to pay her initial reasoning to the president. She didn't have to pay that. She didn't have to give no excuse for that. She just got oh no, that wasn't the real reason. I didn't tell the president that, but because I knew that wouldn't fancy him. That wouldn't get his feathers ruffled. Yo, man, this shit, man. Shit sucks.
Okay, so Reno got the go-ahead, and they decided that they were going to end the standoff one way or the other. On April the 14th, David said that he had received his final message from God. David asked if he could...
Wendigo, you're killing me, bro. You got me up here acting like I'm defending these folks, and I'm not. But what I do understand about your videos is that you're just giving both sides of the coin. That's all you're doing. Okay. And as a human, bro, I'm going when I get drawn into the story, bro, I'm start thinking, damn, even though I don't fuck with y'all, that shouldn't have happened. Or even though I don't fuck with the feds, they definitely should have went. Got us just everybody watching your videos like, we're being so contradictive. Because we always feel like you got, if you think one way, that means you got to think that way. No matter what they do, I don't care if they did a million good things, you already think this way about them, so you have to think about them the whole time. It just so happens in these videos, it happens frequently where you're like, I'm kind of empathizing. And then like, no, don't empathize. Good storytelling again. Okay.
And they decided that they were going to end the standoff one way or the other. On April the 14th, David said that he had received his final message from God. David asked if he could write down his final message of the 7 seals of Revelation, and then after that he would willingly come out as he gives over his manuscript to the media.
On April the 14th, there was a major breakthrough, and that breakthrough was David Koresh's letter to me, which I promptly gave to the FBI, that said that he'd received his mission, that he was working on writing his interpretation of the 7 seals, and that everyone inside was relieved that they didn't have to die now, that the prophecies were not being fulfilled now, and that this would be resolved.
Oh my God. Oh, you know what? If I can get my friend, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to play the religious game. Cause we have long, drawn out conversations about this shit, but he said the same thing. In his religion, the leader wrote that he was God and everything, and then when he was about to die, he then wrote that, oh, I'm not, no, I get to pass it on to somebody. Yeah, it don't die with me. I get to pass it on. And then he passed it on. I'm not gonna say the hookah thing. I don't be knowing how to tread the religion line with everybody, so I don't be wanting to say, so it's the same thing. I was like, and when my friend says it, I'm like, bro, that like, are you going for that? So you telling me God said he the only God, and then he wrote a letter, he wrote a book or a letter before he died saying, oh yeah, by the way, I'm not the only one. We're gonna let this person go ahead and be it now. Like, bro, what the? That's like, what? So it almost makes me believe, like, because you would think that either they scamming or they're actually drinking the Kool-Aid, right? And when something like this happens, it's like, oh, you were scamming. You were scamming because now all of a sudden everything you've been saying ain't what it is. All of a sudden. I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
He was working
I just don't know.
Writing his interpretation of the 7 seals, and that everyone inside was relieved that they didn't have to die now, that the prophecies were not being fulfilled now, and that this would be resolved.
However, this was unacceptable to the HRT, who wanted to see something happen.
FBI testified before the House hearings that their negotiations had reached them.
Yo, these people be looking like all the characters that you expect to be doing this stuff. They always look how they look. I guess this shit is, all the TV characters are based on real life out there. So,
Testified.
Like, look at him.
Before the House hearings that their negotiations had reached an impasse. They told the Attorney General they weren't coming out, and that there was a stalling tactic, and they weren't working on the 7 seals. Their own negotiators had reached an agreement knowing that the first seal was finished, and in order to get proof of it, had sent in typewriter ribbons so that they could get that proof in their hands, and yet the very next morning, they launched the gas and tank attack.
On April the 19th of 1993, several CEVs began to encircle the compound and punch holes within the walls of the building. Earlier that morning, the FBI had called and said, this is your last chance, which again had been 51 days at this point, and they watched as someone threw the phone that they were previously negotiating with out the front door. Supposedly, the FBI took this as the go-ahead. The tanks that had made these holes began pumping CS gas, a type of tear gas, into the structure. Whenever the gas began pumping into the building, the women and children made their way to a bunker located at the side of the building itself. It's believed that one of the reasons they did this was not only for shelter, but because most of the gas masks could not fit children.
And I can just see those kids barfing, vomiting, screaming, because you can't possibly have a gas mask that'll fit a little kid.
Didn't their report say that gas masks don't fit on these babies?
That's correct.
And didn't they know that?
They should have known that.
Several of the men began putting on...
Bro, the way that they use words. You see how the should just kind of just clears him of, he's trying to clear the whole bureau for not, I mean, they should have known. I mean, you were asking me. I mean, they should have. What do you mean they should have? The answer is yes. They did know. What do you mean they should have known? It was reported. There's proof that they knew. And you're going to sit here and say that they should have known. Jesus, bro.
That's correct.
And didn't they know that?
They should have known that.
Several of the men began putting on gas masks and shooting at the tanks that had made entry into the building. During this time, someone reaches out the front door and pulls the phone back in. They also began waving a white flag outside of an upstairs window, as well as a banner that said, "We want our phones fixed." The FBI began to announce that if you want to surrender, simply step outside. However, it now seems that the reason that they wanted to get in contact with the FBI was because the bunker that the women and children were inside of had had its entrance and underground tunnels destroyed by the tanks. The FBI had also inserted a listening device into the walls of the compound, and during this time men can be heard yelling and praying and saying things like, "Wait for the tank to come to light it." It's believed that the men were perhaps making Molotovs as some means of defense against the gas attack. And then, at around noon, the building caught on fire. The fire was massive and seemed to start up all at once, engulfing the majority of the structure. It had been 6 hours since the gas attacks began, but now with the building on fire, people tried to make their way out of the windows. A total of 9 people made it out as the building was burning. These were the final survivors of the Branch Davidians. Fire trucks that were arriving at the scene were stopped by the FBI, who were halted because they, quote, didn't want the firemen to be shot at. The building burnt fast, and it burnt all the way to the ground. The bodies that were found were nearly unrecognizable. From the positions that the bodies were located, it seemed the majority of the men had died trying to free the women and children from the trapped bunker. And within the bunker, it seems that they died of a combination of suffocation and poisoning from the CS gas. When CS gas...
Oh my God, bro. Bruh. You know, rappers rap about Waco. I didn't know, bro, I was alive. I was alive and well. I was thriving. I was becoming a straight A student. While all of this was going on. My mom and grandma watched the news. I heard of Waco. I watched this, but I'm 10. I'm 9, I'm 10. I'm not locked in. This is crazy that the feds did this. This is nuts. This is nuts. Is that a fair assessment, y'all? That this is nuts? Tanks and gases for $200. We cannot, y'all, we can never lose the fact that this is for $200, but they like to make it sound crazy, you know, illegal gun charges. That's why we had, you know. Whenever you say that to a civilian like us just watching, we thinking, oh, they have an arsenal. They have enough guns to build an army. No, we just heard they had a machine gun and then spending $200 to get it registered, for it to be legal. So to legally have one. So that's all. That's the whole reason that's it. That's the truth. But they can't just say that. They have to add the jargon to make it sound way worse. The abuse, the gun charges, the illegal firearms, and all of that type of shit going on. Just villainize them.
The women and children from the trapped bunker.
Even though the motherfucker was some villains.
In the bunker, it seems that they died of a combination of suffocation and poisoning from the CS gas. When CS gas burns, it creates a sort of cyanide poisoning, and from the disfigured forms of the bodies, it seems many of them succumb to this cyanide effect. Several of them seem to have died from a gunshot wound, seemingly as a sort of mercy killing. One of the survivors who made their way out of the building as it was burning brought with them the beginning transcript that David Koresh had been writing, showing that, at least to our knowledge, he was following through on his word.
And then he said, the word came to him and said, write, and he wrote. This was brought out the day of the fire by one of the survivors. He was keeping his promise of April 14th. We believe they would have all come out safely.
This was pulled out of the fire. The tapes were, and then this was written up. as evidence that he was working on that message on the Seven Seals.
David Koresh was found shot, supposedly by his assistant Steve Schneider, who then took his own life. Again, most likely as a form of mercy killing, given the effects of the gas and heat and suffocation. There is a take on this that is widely propagated by the Waco miniseries that came out a few years ago, and that miniseries is good for the most part. It does a good job at visualizing a lot of the standoff. However, in order to make it more of a story, they showed the agents being very remorseful and distraught at the way the situation ended. And while there was certainly some of that in the days that followed, that was not the initial reaction that happened on that day.
As soon as the Branch Davidian Star David flag had fluttered to the ground, they ran the ATF flag up on that flagpole as a symbol of a military conquest, because the whole world saw this as a symbol that the battle was over.
I was a lawyer. Who is thinking that? Who is thinking, yo, go get the flag, make sure the flag here, because when we take this down, we gonna raise the pole. Matter of fact, while we're doing this, make sure the tanks don't hit the fucking pole. How did the Star of David flag get off the pole if the pole is standing right up? The fucking Texas flag is doing just fine.
Saw this as a symbol that the battle was over, because the ATF flag up on Branch Davidian Star David flag had fluttered to the ground. They ran the ATF flag up on that flagpole as a symbol of a military...
Oh, okay. I think they ran the Texas flag up as well, because it looked like when the Star of David flag flew, it wasn't no flag up there. My bad.
Conquest, because the whole world saw this as a symbol that the battle was over.
I was a lawyer, and I had David Koresh's grandmother with me, and I wanted to see about talking to him. And after a few minutes, another one came up to me who was obviously the guy in charge and was very surly and declined to give me any information at all. So I started to leave, and just as I left and turned my back and started walking toward my van, I heard a voice say, coming from one of those people, I don't know which one, but one of them said, I hope she has told him goodbye. That was the mentality of the people who were guarding the gates. Those were federal law enforcement authorities. And their attitude was, we are going to get revenge against David Koresh, and if that means we have to eliminate all of them in there, that's just fine too. That was the attitude that they had.
Like them or not, or like what we do for a living or not,
look at them.
They've been law enforcement officers, some of them, longer than I've been alive. And with that comes a lot of experience. What I'm saying is, you have to trust the people in charge at the time. I'm low on the food chain, so I'm standing by what they did, because I do what I'm told as long as it's legal and moral.
My God. Torturing babies. And saying it's
legal and moral. Y'all gassed babies. Legal and moral.
God. Torturing babies. And saying it's part of their job. And saying it's okay because their parents were bad. Our whole society is structured around the notion that if parents are bad, we protect the children even against the parents. In this case, the FBI and the government took the position, why, not only do we not protect the children, we use them as an instrument to try to get their parents to do something. We'll torture them so their parents will do right. Oh, my God, where did they think that up?
Not only did they wave a victory banner, but they began to pose with their rifles over the bodies of dead children, as well as do things like remove the aforementioned door and other pieces of evidence from the compound. Not to mention running the massive story that the entire group had died due to one massive suicide.
Is there any doubt in your mind or the Justice Department's mind that the fire was set by the cult members?
I have absolutely no doubt at all that the cult members set it based on all the information that has been furnished to me.
David Koresh and the Davidians set fire to themselves and committed suicide. The government did not do that.
Which leads us into the big question and
Joe Biden talking about? What Joe Biden talking about? So what did the government do? How about that? Just tell us what they did. Just tell us just tell us the parts they did. Okay, the fire. Okay, that's a part of it. What about the other stuff? Huh, Joe? What about the other stuff, Joe?
Did not do that.
Which leads us into the big question and conspiracy of Waco. Who started the fire? So, the State Department maintains to this day, in everything that you look at, that the Davidians started the fire in order to go out in one big blaze of glory. Now, ignoring everything that I've said up until this point, and everyone who is there, and all of the experts, that this was in no way their intention, the evidence itself doesn't line up with that either. Do you remember how I said there was audio from listening devices of what the men were doing whenever the building began to burn? Well, they used phrases that were supposedly picked out, like light it when the tank gets here, to imply that they were planning to light themselves up. However, not only is that taken out of context, and again probably about the Molotovs according to the survivors who ran out of the building, but in the trials that followed, the juries couldn't even pick out if that's what was being said, as the audio was too garbled to tell. Despite this was used as evidence to show another crazy cult offing themselves. Furthermore, if this was a cult suicide, then why do things like try to wear gas masks, and people trying to escape, and the men trying to get the women and children out of the bunker, and even going to the bunker in the first place? This is also excluding the testimony of the 9 survivors who said everyone was panicked and trying to survive. Not to mention, the FBI was saying weird stuff before it even began, implying that they knew a fire was about to take place.
At one point, the FBI asked them, do they have fire extinguishers? And Schneider sends someone to check and comes back with the report that there's only one fire extinguisher in the building. The FBI negotiator's response is, somebody ought to buy some fire insurance.
One of the big contentions in the trial that followed was the use of CS gas, as you can imagine. And several of the state-appointed experts said that CS gas is not flammable. Which, yeah, it is. For one, CS gas is not just CS. It is a powder in its natural form, and it needs some other compound to make it an aerosol spray. The agent that was used at Waco was methylene chloride, which is flammable. And CS gas is also flammable. And when you put the two together, it's still flammable. Attorneys would skirt around this and say things like, yeah, in an open flame, which whenever you're destroying an entire house with several tanks, there's a chance that something's going to spark. And the most that they would say is, well, maybe the CS gas added to the accelerant after the Davidians had begun their suicide attempt. Not only that, but the FBI maintained for years that there was no shots or pyrotechnics used at the final day.
So for years, they have been lying about something that nobody believes. Nobody believes them. But they're still sticking to it today, 2026. This is what I'm saying. Why are they even panicking in the first place? Look at how long y'all been telling the lie that nobody believes. What was the cleanup for in the first place? Why were you trying to clean up Ruby Ridge? Why were you trying to even redeem? This didn't do that for you. This didn't do that for you.
Had begun their suicide attempt. Not only that, but the FBI maintained for years that there was no shots or pyrotechnics used at the final day of the siege. Well, for one, the thermal imagery shows that that's a lie.
20 seconds after the 2 gymnasium flashes, still more automatic gunfire can be seen coming from the field to the left of the demolition tank.
And it turns out 6 years later that there was pyrotechnics used. As a matter of fact, the pyrotechnics had been sourced from a local military base, which is another lie the FBI said when they claimed that they received no weaponry from the military. But it turns out that 40mm grenade casings were discovered in the wreckage.
This pyrotechnic projectile is one of 2 found in the rubble of Mount Carmel. It's a 40mm military device that's fired from a handheld grenade launcher. This one was found here, near the corner of Mount Carmel where the first fire started. The other was found here, in the kitchen dining room area.
This is a civilian version. It's a 37mm launcher, which is pretty much...
Bro, what the fuck? What's up, bro? Goon. See, this is what I'm saying. Where does the goon come in? Because it's starting to make sense now. Okay? It's making sense. My boy got all the work. My boy having all the hammers.
This is a civilian version. It's a 37 millimeter launcher, which is pretty much just for shooting flares and looking neat. But it's similar in construction to the one that would have been used at Waco. You load a grenade in there and then shut it, and then it fires a grenade towards your intended target.
Right.
I don't know how to tell you this, but this is about as pyrotechnic as it gets. And whenever it came out that for 6 years, over 100 federal agents had lied, saying that to their knowledge, no pyrotechnics were used, their defense was that they were shooting the water reservoir behind the building. Which, for one, no, you weren't. 2, why would you do that? And 3, that's still a lie. You still shot pyrotechnics at a building full of flammable gas that's not flammable. And also, like, even if you strip all of that away, you strip the fact it was flammable, and then they shot explosives at the flames, and then blamed the cult for doing it themselves, what was their plan with all of that? Right? Because, again, they're still operating under the assumption that this is some crazy doomsday cult, and the reason they didn't want to just shoot Koresh is because they're afraid everyone would freak out and off themselves. So what solution is it to run tear gas through holes that you made into the house? If this was such a crazy scenario, did you think that would make it better? Not to mention that they were knowingly gassing children and the elderly in order to make them come outside. I have never met or heard the opinion of anyone who felt like this was a good idea.
Okay,
except
now.
for, random documentaries, news sites, and YouTube channels, but that's besides the point. That day, 82 people died, 23 of which were children. In the aftermath, 12 of the survivors were charged with illegally aiding and abetting the murder of a federal agent, as well as possessing and manufacturing illegal weapons. 4 were acquitted, and 8 were given charges related to using a weapon during an illegal act. As of July of 2007, all have been released. In audio tapes that made their way out to the public in the weeks following, David Koresh was heard stating that he simply asked for 2 more weeks to finish his final revelation, and then they would all leave the compound. You can judge the validity of this yourself, but after a standoff that lasted 48 days, when Koresh asked for 14 more, the FBI only allowed him 3.
Assertion to me that the media and that the government has made a kind of blanket declaration that the Branch Davidians committed, quote, mass suicide, to equate it to a Jonestown, Guyana suicide, is the most irresponsible statement that can be attributed to anything having to do with the Waco incident.
As one of them afterwards said, Livingstone Fagan, who lost a wife in the fire and his mother in the fire, he said, those of our people who died are highly honored in heaven, and so we should not worry about them. The thought was that the army of Babylon would kill them, as perhaps it ultimately did.
The way things are supposed to happen in this country is when someone's suspected of a crime, even if it's child abuse, even if it's capital murder, we give them a trial, a jury finds them.
Yo, that's crazy. That's nuts. My boy, and maybe I got it wrong. Maybe he wasn't trying to rewrite, but I'm going to say he trying to rewrite the ending. Meanwhile, the ending they already wrote is actually happening right now to some of the members. Damn. It gets deep.
Child abuse, even if it's capital murder, we give them a trial. A jury finds them guilty beyond a reasonable doubt before they go to sentencing. Then a jury or a judge sentences them, and an appeals court makes sure the trial was conducted with due process. And then and only then do we kill them. We don't kill them first, like happened in Waco on April the 19th.
The trials that followed were a political storm, from people who steadfastly agreed with all the actions that the FBI and ATF pursued, as well as those who called for an immediate removal of...
It's nuts, but I can understand how the media and how they created the narratives to get the civilians, because I could see, like, I could see a grandparent, you know what I mean, believing everything on the law side. I could see that due to the news.
Pretty much the whole government. And it seems that a lot with all the actions that the FBI and ATF pursued, as well as those who called for an immediate removal of pretty much the whole government. And it seems that a lot of stuff conveniently went missing.
And kept in contact through the White House counsel. I'm sure the White House counsel advised the president.
We're missing some of your telephone logs, particularly April 17th, 18th, and 19th. And our problem is that they've all been redacted. And is there any chance that we could get those?
The thing that really concerns me is why the building was so totally destroyed.
That's so crazy, y'all. They can just redact that's just it. That's just it, guys. You don't get to read what we said, because if we remove those black lines, we all be going down based on the law, even though I know we really ain't gonna go down, but you get what I'm saying. We can't just put it in their face like that, because they really could just say, yeah, we did all this shit, and but then that might cause an uprising that they don't want. So here we are. Even though the proof always comes out later, again with us, we're conditioned is if enough time passed, we ain't too worried about it no more. Oh, it happened. Oh, it really did happen. They really did kill those kids, huh? Oh, well, damn. That was 1,000,000 years ago. Want to go eat some Jersey Mike's? Let's go get some Jersey Mike's. Talk about this last episode of Survivor. The fuck?
Afterwards, after the fire was out, there was no firefighting whatsoever attempted, and then the crime scene, and it was a crime scene, was totally, absolutely destroyed. And I've seen this happen before.
Did you see the FBI changing the crime scene in any way?
Yes, sir. As I'd said earlier and didn't get to finish the answer, they were moving the vehicles, which destroyed valuable trajectory evidence. And in the end, it turned out didn't matter because the
But it didn't seem to be standard operating procedure. You don't consider that standard operating procedure, do you?
Certainly not in any crime scene I've ever been on. No.
Lon Haruchi, the guy who fired the shot that killed Vicky Weaver back at Ruby Ridge, was stationed with his sniper rifle on the final day of the siege. If you remember, the official story is that no shots were fired at the Davidians, however this seems to not be true. Supposedly Lon fired several shots at the compound as people were trying to escape. However, when an investigation began, it turns out that he had immediately re-barreled his rifle, meaning that no shots could be traced back to him. On top of that, all independent autopsy footage was confiscated by the FBI and seemingly disappeared during the trials that followed.
They told us that they had misplaced it. At one time they told us that I have it in my briefcase and I'll give it to you. In fact, we said that we're going to delay giving you reports until you give a tape back. And of course, they said, sure, we'll give you a tape back next time we come to your office. We in fact suggested we would go to Waco and collect the tape from them. And they said, no, it's San Antonio office. And at a certain point along this discussion, they finally said, the tape is lost. We can't give it to you.
Initially, everyone maintained a tight lip of superiority, but in the following years, as I mentioned earlier, people began to come forward with stories of pyrotechnics being used, to stories of the door disappearing, and even matters of who shot first. Regardless, to many in government, this was viewed as a win, with Clinton using this victory over a crazed cult to further justify his 1994 assault weapons ban. As is the case with most tragedies, it would go on to spark many more disasters. When Timothy McVeigh committed the Oklahoma City bombing, the largest terror attack in the United States up until 9/11, he cited Waco and Ruby Ridge as his primary reasons, even appearing outside of several of the trials following Waco, selling t-shirts and bumper stickers of individuals like Lon Horiuchi. Several of the survivors would go on to file lawsuits and tell their stories, such as David Thibodeau, whose book that he wrote about his experience the inspiration for the miniseries Waco, became the inspiration for the miniseries Waco, as well as other stories and narrations of the events that occurred in 1993, such as the one you're listening to right now. And again, at the end, I know that it's easy to get heated on both sides of this. Why did the government do such violent actions? Why didn't David just come out Why did both sides have to become so steadfast and stuck in their own mindset that it led to such a needless tragedy? And I don't have all of the answers for that. I wish I did. I wish I could just give you a blanket statement of this why bad thing happened here on to stage 2. But as with most of my videos, I am just the storyteller, or I'm the orator who is trying to recount this to you. Again, I think there was a lot of evil on both sides, and the only people I consider to be blameless victims are the children who were a victim of 2 different kinds of tyranny. It's a depressing, gut-wrenching tragedy that hopefully some of us can learn from. And as with most of the stories that I try to tell, hopefully learning about the past can teach us something about the present. And what is that lesson to be learned?
No.
I don't know. I'm just the YouTube guy. And I understand this story's very depressing, but hopefully it was at least a little bit educational and didn't totally ruin your day. I'm so sorry if it did. But hey, even if it did, I just want to say thank you for watching. This video is probably going to get nuked in either the algorithm or by monetization or by my channel. We'll just have to see. But this is something that I've known about, you know, obviously me being weird in the way that I am, for a while now, and something I've wanted to talk about for a while. And I thought it deserved a
Weird in an awesome way. How about that? How about that, Wendy? Weird and awesome. Awesomely weird. How about that?
For a while now, and something I've wanted to talk about for a while. And I thought it deserved a longer video like this, and it deserved its due justice. And like I said, I'm not saying this to vilify one side or exemplify the other, more so to point out faults on both ends and the eventual fault of the entire situation itself. It is very sad. I would say the one thing, like, I know I went a bit harder on the criticism of the government than I did Koresh. I think in the beginning I adequately described why I don't like Koresh, you know, the whole 14-year-old thing. There's always going to be bad people who hurt others and take advantage of others and try to exemplify themselves. And like I said, I do think Koresh believed in himself, but you know what they say about good intentions. But he is supposed to be the exception. He's supposed to be the people that were protected from by the people who showed up supposedly to protect these children. They are the ones who are to be held to a higher standard. So if it sounded like, and I understand, more harsh to the federal agents in this story, that's because the federal agents are supposed to be the ones who protect us. They're the ones.
And keeping it clean, keeping it truthful, and just not lying to us so much, man. Just not, like, y'all are actively getting together to come up with horrible stories, horrible lies. And just in court, like, hey man, hey, they should have known. They should have knew that. I don't know.
That's because the federal agents are supposed to be the ones who protect us. They're the ones who have their livelihood and the trust of the people around them to protect us from people like David Koresh. I'm not broken down and disheartened by the immorality of a cult leader. I'm broken down and disheartened by the immorality of the justice system.
Come on,
so,
man.
Yeah, I was
this man saying the shit that I want to say now. I'm with you. I get it, bro. I'm not really rocking with either side, right? But if I'm living in this story and we're just focused on this and we're just removing all, I get it. I get why you criticize the government more than you did the cult in this story. Even though we not rocking with either side. That don't mean we can't understand. And that's just where I'm at with it.
Harsh with them, but I expect them to be held to a higher degree. But that's enough rant about Waco and Ruby Ridge and all of that. This is going to be the video that does me in, isn't it? It's been a good run, boys. Really, though, thank you for watching. I'm probably going to need to dial back the seriousness a little bit. A lot of you seem to like the what was last video? The North Hollywood shootout video. and I really appreciate that. That video got demonetized, and then I fought on Twitter and got it back. I'm going to have a much harder time fighting this one, but we'll see how it goes. But really, though, thank you all for watching. Like I said, it's worth it to talk about some of this stuff, and if you guys like it, then mission accomplished. But hopefully it stays up so that you can like it. Like I said in the last video, if 1 or 2 gets demonetized, that's fine. The whole channel, not so much. But I don't think this will be that awful. Knock on wood. We'll see. But thank you all for sticking around either way. It means a lot. I love making videos for you guys. I'm glad that you enjoy them. It just really is heartwarming to see. The channel's growing. It's doing fantastic. We're at 1.39 million. Which is really, it means a lot. Thank you all for that. Thank you for putting me to this level. Thank you for allowing me to make weird, however long this video is going to cut down to. I've been recording for like 5 hours. Thank you for allowing me to make these weird rants about Waco, and you all watch them, and it really does mean the most. So,
Wendigoon Goon. I'm going to be so upset if they try to claim that music in the background. I'm going to be so upset, bro. Because you've been playing music in the background this whole time, and maybe I missed it in the earlier videos. I don't know, but bruh, if I got bruh.
That is that. Like I said, I'm probably going to need to take it easier on the uploads, at least for the heavy stuff. Probably do some more ARGs or funsy little, ow, hit my knee, funsy little creepy stories. I'm a mess. Rather than just whatever these past couple uploads have been. But let me know if you like this kind of thing, because I like doing it, and like I said, assuming this doesn't kill my channel, I would like to do more like this in the future, so we'll see how it goes. But for now, I just want to say thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.
I fuck with Wendigoon. You know why I fuck with Wendigoon, man? Because he go on his little rants like me. You know? And then he reels it in. But he goes on his little wander missions where he's talking about something that's not related to the video, but it is related to the video. I like that. I'm about that. All right? He repeats things. I know I'm good for that. I'll repeat some shit over and over because this shit's so unbelievable. I got to keep repeating it. Oh, man. Man. I said what I had to say. That was great. Come on, y'all. Come on. What's the next one? Like, comment, share, subscribe. Catch y'all on the next one. Peace.